welcome to this new appointment of the 1 Hour with Europe webinar series. I'm Massimo Bosoli. I am the director of the Norwegian University of Science and Technology Brussels office. And today with me, I have the honor and the pleasure to have Steven Engels, the head of unit of DG Employment of the European Commission. We have decided to come out a little bit from our typical approach. This time we are going to go a little bit aside from research and innovation, but on an important area, which is the area of skills. And today in focus is the Pact of Skills and the Skills Portability Initiative, which for a university could also represent a possible framework, or if you want, a new business area, and will be interesting to somehow dig into it. Before starting and giving the word to our speaker, I would like to basically give you a little bit of rules of the game, especially for the newcomers that are many today, given the change of topic. We normally give our speaker between 20-25 minutes to present the case or to present you what is boiling in the pot in the area of interest of himself. And then we are giving the possibility to all of you to intervene. So do not write questions on the chat. Use the chat just to put your name, and we will be very happy to provide you the possibility to open your camera and microphone, so to challenge our speaker directly. I don't want, of course, to take too much time to the discussion because we have had a very good amount of interest about it, and we are very happy about it. So, Steven, welcome. Thank you very much for your availability to discuss with us this very interesting and appealing area that the Commission is working on, and I would say also booming in all the European policies. So,
thanks a lot, Massimo. I'm really happy to be there. The format for me is a bit new, so bear with me. But I think we can make it into an interesting talk. So, as said, indeed, I am head of unit in employment and social policies, DG. And I work on, or my formal title is Professional Qualifications and Skills for Competitiveness. Now, that sounds like a huge amount of work and a big responsibility, and I can assure you it is. But I would want to talk about some of the files that are currently keeping me awake at night. The context is the Union of Skills, and inside that overall strategy, I would like to talk about, indeed, as Massimo has already announced, the Skills Portability Initiative and the Pact for Skills, which is an initiative that is ongoing already. The Union of Skills is the communication that the Commission has adopted in March of last year, outlining, if you want, the entire strategy for the mandate on everything that has to do with skills. And the novelty of this strategy is that for the first time since I joined the Commission, and I think even before that, for the first time in at least 15 years, we have this overarching strategy that links basic education all the way up to adult learning. And so we have a plan for, let's say, skills and human capital development throughout the life cycle. So it involves basic education policies, higher education policies, but then also upskilling and reskilling of the workforce, and indeed skills portability, as I will come to. So it's an encompassing strategy. And inside that strategy, there's four big, let's say, pillars. One is to build skills, so that's a reference to basic education. The other one is then to maintain and upskill and reskill these skills when people have already reached the working age. Circulation of skills and skills portability is another topic. And fourthly, it's also about attracting talent from outside of the EU into the single market. So that's the overarching strategy. And my unit is responsible for a number of initiatives within that overarching strategy. Basically, two that I would like to highlight in today's talk is the Pact for Skills, and that's firmly rooted in the second pillar, upskilling and reskilling. So here we are talking not about basic education, but we are talking about collaboration between all kinds of actors, and I will give a bit of a flavor of what I have in mind on upskilling and reskilling the workforce in light of the changing skills needs. And then the second initiative that I would want to talk about touches on the third and the fourth pillar of the Union of Skills. It's about circulation of skills within the single market, so making sure that people can use their talent and their acquired skills, but also the qualifications outside of the borders of the country in which they acquired them. And then, crucially, also another dimension of skills portability is attracting skills through the single market from outside. On the Pact for Skills, first and foremost, this is an old initiative. It exists, but it's growing very quickly, and this is, of course, a great pleasure. The Pact for Skills is a very basic thing. It's the idea that in order to keep our workforce skilled for the future, we need to collaborate. And when I say we need to collaborate, I mean public authorities, of course, at all levels, local, regional, national, European, but also bring in the private sector, bring in academia, bring in NGOs, bring in social partners, everybody. And the idea is that people and sectors and ecosystems and companies are all suffering from different but very similar challenges. And so by pooling our resources and by joining into the reflection and joining into the action as to how we can address those challenges, we gain. That's the idea. So we are indeed in the market, of course, competitors when we talk about companies, but since the challenges are very similar, we need to pool the resources. That's the Pact for Skills. It's that easy. Now, the Pact for Skills was launched in 2020, and it was launched as a very low threshold, very market-sensitive collaboration framework, where we said all of those that want to collaborate and join in forces to work on upskilling and reskilling the workforce can join. And what we will offer is simply a framework that structures the cooperation, boosts the cooperation, and connects the dots. And so it's not a funding instrument. It's not by becoming a member of the Pact for Skills that you all of a sudden get a grant or something, but I will come to the link with finance in a second. The idea was to have this very market-sensitive, low-threshold platform for collaboration. And then, of course, you start rolling it out, and you start rolling it out in different sectors. And initially, we focused very much on the 14 ecosystems that are part of the Commission's industrial strategy. So we try to build what we then called large-scale skills partnerships in those ecosystems, bringing together industry associations, chambers of commerce, professional organizations, academia, learning and training providers, public authorities around those various ecosystems. But then all of a sudden we realized that actually the formula, having a low threshold, non-funded instrument just to bundle and pool the resources, it was attractive to, let's say, people and sectors that we didn't even think about. So one of the nice surprises I had when I joined this area of work was at some point I was approached by the bicycle industry. And I never even, I'm a cycler. I cycle to work every day. So now in the office, there is this Velo May competition, which unit brings most people in on the bike during the month of May. We are in 3rd place. But honestly, if it were Velo Février, I would win the competition because I always come by bike. I was never expecting, however, that there was such a thing as the bicycle industry with their own interests, with their own problems, with their own shortages in skills. We were approached by them, and when I say them, I mean some companies, small, some companies really large, and some local authorities, cities, Utrecht, Copenhagen, and so on. And they said, listen, we think cycling is the wave of the future, but we see a problem, and the problem is skills. Very specifically, they had made this analysis where they said, in our ecosystem, what is blocking further growth is the lack of people with the right qualifications to repair electric bikes. So it's not producers, but preparation of electric bike maintenance, because people don't want to make an investment in bikes that are quite expensive, let's be honest, if they are not fully confident that in their neighborhood there will be a maintenance guy or maintenance lady that can help them whenever there's a problem. So they said, we need to cooperate. And by we, again, they meant local authorities, big and small companies, and so on. And they wanted to know about the Pact for Skills. And they said, what does it offer? And when I explained them what it offers networking opportunities, it offers knowledge, it offers access to methodologies on how to do skills intelligence, it offers access to other like-minded people that have the same issues, and all of this. And it explains also how to navigate the European system of skills policies, where you can get grants, where you can get support for this, and so on. And they said, this is exactly what we need. And then they asked, what do you want in return? And the answer is very simple. Everybody is welcome to join the Pact for Skills, provided there are some serious commitments to upskilling and reskilling. That's the only thing we ask. So you become a member by signing a charter that outlines the principles, and by committing a number of efforts in the context of the upskilling and reskilling. Now, this might all seem very low key, but it works very well. So by now, 4,000 organizations have joined us. 4,000 organizations are pooling resources in those 22 large-scale skills partnerships. We are also regionalizing the thing because the skills need might be different from one region to the other. Actually, it's quite successful. What we like to see very much is this network effect. You join Facebook, you join Instagram because your friends are joining Facebook and Instagram. And we see something similar now in the Pact for Skills. People become more interested in the instrument because the instrument itself becomes more powerful. The network is growing. One university looks at the membership and notices that other universities are joining, so it might be an interesting place to be. It's a bit like a big party, but then on serious business. 10 million people have already benefited from upskilling and reskilling efforts framed in the context of the Pact for Skills. 2 billion was already invested in upskilling and reskilling thanks to the Pact for Skills. And so we are developing training courses, for instance, for bicycle maintenance engineers that are then disseminated throughout. And the beauty of the thing is indeed, as I said at the beginning, this collaboration. Vocational education and training institutions have courses on offer. The Pact for Skills allows them to disseminate them more broadly than they initially anticipated. The other beauty is skills intelligence. So by bundling resources and by joining forces on how to conduct skills intelligence, you get a much more granular view of what is needed today and what is needed tomorrow, but also where you can get it, and so regionally speaking them. So that's the first thing I wanted to say. This Pact for Skills is quite a success story if you look at it in terms of cost effectiveness. For us, it's not a very expensive instrument. We pay the support services. Of course, members should be able to rely on the support services that organizes the network opportunities, that provides the information and the guidance on how to navigate the European system. But that's all relatively low cost, and the impact is rather sizable. Now, that said, we are never satisfied. So we have asked in the context of the Union of Skills to beef up the commitments. So there's a commitment that the different organizations have taken to upskill 25 million people, but we asked them to double that. Now, it's easier said than done. So the reply, let's say, we anticipate is that people then say, but what are you going to do to allow me to reach these goals? And we said, okay, we're going to have to boost, streamline, and enhance the effectiveness of the Pact for Skills. And so there we said, let's think about what we can do. And we came up with this idea of Pact for Skills 2.0. So it's the same foundation because it works quite well. We also want to keep it very much low threshold, market sensitive, not to scare away any people that might feel intimidated by the need to pledge certain commitments or by the anticipated level of bureaucracy, which is, again, very, very low, but we don't want to scare them away. So we want a large membership, but we also want these members to be very active and to do real things. And so we said, what can we do? First thing is, we had an older instrument, which was called the European Alliance for Apprenticeships, and it's also working quite well. It also brings together companies that want to work on offering good quality traineeships and such. But in a way, if you think about it, skilling people through traineeships or skilling people in, let's say, more traditional adult learning formats, it's the same thing. It's the same goal. It's the same objective. You want to just have a skilled workforce. By the way, traineeships are no longer just focused on young people. Now you have traineeships also at later stages in your career. So we said there is duplication there. Let's bring those two networks, because the other one also has a nice a large network of associated members. Let's bring them together and let's offer them the same level of support. So that was a first no-brainer merger of two platforms. The other thing that we said is we need to modernize the charter. The world has changed. The geopolitics have changed. The other priorities of the Commission have changed to adapt to this changing environment. So let's bring everybody up to speed and rewrite the charter so that people know what they're committed to. And then we said, listen, there is this link with financial support. So the Pact for Skills in and of itself is not a funded instrument, but there has to be something in it for the members. Otherwise, why would you even bother become a member of the Pact for Skills? Because it does imply that you need to report a bit on the activities that you do and such. So we said we need to make it interesting for them. we do make it interesting for them by guiding them through the maze of opportunities, Centres of Vocational Excellence, blueprint, grants, and all of this. So that's already in and of itself, I think, really useful, and it seems to be useful for 4,000 members. But we wanted to beef that up a bit, and we said that we would reinforce the link between active Pact membership and financial grants. So very clearly, I'm stating that Pact membership is not a condition or an eligibility condition to have access to blueprint grants, for instance, but it is one of the criterion that we look at when we evaluate proposals. So it's interesting for consortia or individual members when they apply for a Blueprint Alliance or when they apply for other, let's say, Erasmus Plus funded EU instruments, to really show off their Pact engagement and what they're doing in that context, because it can make the difference between a successful or an unsuccessful application. It's not a condition, but it does play a role in the evaluation. And then we said another thing that is absolutely crucial, and this really comes from the large-scale skills partnerships themselves, is that everybody is engaged in skills intelligence. Everybody wants to know where the skills needs will pop up that will define the next 10 years, the next 15 years, and so on. And it's good to approach this from different angles with different methodologies. The automotive sector is not the same as the tourist sector, so you need to have a different approach. At the same time, very often people are talking about the same profiles. I was struck at some point a few weeks ago, well, a few months ago actually. I had different meetings in the same week with very different industries. One of them I remember was nuclear, but there was another one as well. Very different industries, and they all were looking for welders. So it's one of those professions that stands out where people say we have a shortage, and then the next sector says we have a shortage. Electricians is another one. Right? So you see it pop up in different places. So it's important when you have your skills intelligence activities rolled out to focus on your sector, but it's also important to somehow gather an overview, to consolidate. And this should work in two directions. You should have these sectoral skills intelligence activities developing organically by the private sector, by academia, by a combination of the two, to feed into, let's say, a European vision, and then the European consolidated information should feed back into the sectoral. And that's why we, in the context of the Pact for Skills, in the context of the Union of Skills, we said, let's do this EU Skills Observatory. And then in the context of the Pact for Skills, the idea is that the support services contractor that we hire would bring in the methodologies from the different sectors and feed that to the Skills Observatory, and then it should come back. So again, an effort at defragmentation. So basically what I'm saying is we have a successful instrument. It costs you very little effort and no money at all to become a member. And if you become a member, you become part of a community that sees benefits in working together and that jointly navigates the European system. So if you're interested in, let's say, skills, reskilling and upskilling with a European dimension, then becoming a member of the Pact for Skills is a no-brainer. So that's my publicity talk now. The other thing I wanted to talk about in the context of this, and then I'm very open to answer all your questions, or at least to try, is skills portability. The Union of Skills, we put it out there as a communication, but it's not an existing thing. We don't have a Union of Skills today. We have very high qualified people at all levels of education. I'm not only talking about people that have a tertiary education, but also vocational education and training is super important to us for our future workforce and for our current workforce. But we don't have a Union of Skills. It's still very difficult to travel around in Europe with your qualifications and your skills that you've acquired in one context and to market them in another context. So the Union of Skills, it's a communication, it's also an aspiration. It's something that we work towards. And skills portability is absolutely crucial. If you look at the numbers, they're actually daunting. So everybody knows what overqualification means. It means you're exercising a profession or you're doing a job, but actually you're overqualified. You have a degree that would allow you to work at a different level. Now, obviously, this is sometimes your own personal choice. You may want to work in a field that is different from the field that you studied and so on. But still, overqualification is very clearly a structural feature of our labor markets. 20% overqualification for people that work within the domestic economy. So Germans working in Germany, Italians working in Italy, 1 out of 5 is overqualified for the job. If we look at people that move across borders, already 30%. So that means that there is an issue. Italians seem to have trouble getting their qualifications and skills understood in Germany and vice versa. There's an issue of understanding, there's an issue of not trusting fully, there's an issue of regulatory barriers as well. I will come to that in a second. And then just to round up my figures, if we look at third country nationals, and we have a lot of them working in the single market, and especially in very crucial shortage occupations, the number already goes even higher to 40%. So it's easy for me to remember. It's 20% for everybody, 30% for mobile citizens, and 40%, it's actually 39.6 or something, but rounded up, 40% for third country nationals. So we do have an issue. Overqualification in and of itself is a natural phenomenon of every labor market, but still 20% is high. And then 30 and 40 is way too high. So there is an issue. If people cross borders, they lose the ability to get their qualifications and skills understood and to market them and to get the job that they want. Now, this has several causes, and one is, as I said, trust and understanding. So there, I think we need to beef up our efforts to use the tools that we have, because it's not like we start from scratch. We have transparency tools, European Qualification Framework, ESCO, and so on. But the take-up of these things is very cumbersome, and it's not where we want it to be. And that's part of the Skills Portability Initiative. So the Skills Portability Initiative is an intervention in 3 areas that all tackle the same issue. And the same issue is, first, we have shortages, and then we have skills waste, these overqualification rates. So what can we do about it? First action, transparency tools, understanding. Let's bring that up to speed. Let's make sure that these instruments are rolled out. We think digital tools can help. So the wave of the future is digital credentials formatted in such a way that nobody can doubt their authenticity. And everybody understands immediately what they are talking about. So an Italian degree should be more quickly understood by somebody in Belgium, and a French degree should travel to Norway or to Sweden without getting lost in translation. That's what we call Action 1 of the Skills Portability Initiative. It applies across all the sectors, all the qualification levels. Action 2 is a specific one, and my unit is, among other things, responsible for that. It's focused on regulated professions. So in member states have the option to regulate professions, and they do so for different very good reasons: health and safety, patient safety, consumer safety, natural environment. In member states, some professions are regulated, others are not, and the regulation is often very different. We have no problem with regulation of professions. It's a prerogative of the member states to do so. They have to do so in accordance with European law. It has to be proportional and not excessive, and so on. But we see a great variety of regulation in member states. In some member states, hairdressers are regulated, in many member states actually, and they are regulated in different ways. In other member states, a profession is regulated, but then in the next door neighbor, it's not. So this already in and of itself creates frictions, because somebody with a degree and who is qualified to become a hairdresser in Luxembourg cannot necessarily immediately exercise that same profession in Belgium because of the difference in regulation. So there we said we need a solution, and we didn't say it yesterday. We said it 25 years ago already. And 25 years ago already, we found a solution for that problem, and that is called the Professional Qualifications Directive. So it's a directive that allows people to travel with qualifications that are needed to exercise regulated professions and to have them recognized in another member state. And it works quite well. And we have, on average, 53,000 people moving in the single market, exercising a regulated profession, asking for recognition when they cross the border every year. So it works quite well. We have complaints, of course, my unit deals with all of those, but we are quite happy with, let's say, the legal framework. But obviously that legal framework conceived 25 years ago is a bit old. It's not digital, it's not agile, it's not fast, it's costly, it's cumbersome. So what we're now doing in the context of the Skills Portability Initiative is to have a really good look at the engine of the system and say, can we not speed it up? We have a nice deux chevaux. We want to turn it into a Formula One car that really goes quickly. Just to give you an example, there is inside of that legal framework something called automatic recognition for certain professions. We call it automatic recognition. It takes 4 months. Yeah. 3 months. Automatic recognition takes 3 months. It's still too long. It's still a lot of paperwork. And so we want to accelerate that, and we think digital tools again can help us there. Now, obviously, I want to caution, we are not only concerned about mobility. If we're talking about regulated professions, there are safety concerns, there are patient rights concerns, there are all kinds of very legitimate objectives that we want to achieve with this regulation. We don't want to jeopardize that by just having people move around. So we try to find a balance between enhancing mobility while safeguarding the standards of practice. You don't want your electrician coming from another country mess up your house. So we try to find that balance, but we think in terms of procedures, in terms of just administrative handling, it should be much cheaper, and it can be much cheaper. It should be much faster. It should be much easier for the applicants to do so. And there I've seen some pilot projects that we are now trying to roll out, which are extremely impressive in the sense that you interact with a chatbot that tells you your application is now complete. You click, you send. Whereas in the current system, you don't know whether it's complete. You send, and then you get 3 weeks later, you get a reply. You need to send this and that. So it sounds very procedural. It is very procedural, but it's hugely important to our citizens that travel around and that exercise professions like plumber, Christian, or university professor, researcher. So well, that's the action 2 of the skills portability. And then just before I stop, the last thing I said, the Union of Skills is also about attracting talent from abroad. And I think we need that. So often in conversations, sometimes in conversations, I get a bit of pushback when I plead for attracting more people from outside of the union to alleviate our skills shortages. And people say, shouldn't we first upskill and reskill our people? And I said, well, maybe that was the solution 40, 50 years ago. But if you look at the numbers now, if you look at the shortages now, and if you look at how these shortages do not allow us to grow in the ways we want to, do not allow us to achieve the objectives of the green and digital transition, do not allow us to gain our, let's say, sovereignty in the world and our independence. So all of our policy goals are jeopardized by these very acute, huge skill shortages. We don't have the luxury to do first one thing and then the other. We need to do both at the same time. We need to massively become better at upskilling and reskilling. We need to invest in basic education, in higher education. And at the very same time, we need to attract more skilled people from outside of the EU. And that's what the third leg of the Skills Portability Initiative is all about. Very carefully, we do not want to mess with member states' migration regimes. It's out of the question. If they decide that they want to keep the borders shut, or that they want to attract this type of people, or only that amount of people, that's entirely their prerogative. We also don't want to mess with the member states' prerogative to regulate professions on their territory. I just said that it's their decision to say electricians need to have these and these qualifications before they can become an electrician. We don't want to touch that either. What we do want to do is to give third country nationals arriving in Europe a bit of the same legal predictability and administrative ease that our own citizens enjoy. Because for now, the Professional Qualifications Directive is not applicable to them. So it's only applicable to EU citizens, which means that somebody from, let's say, I don't know, Iceland, or somebody from Uzbekistan working in the EU has to go through national recognition procedures. And it's all fine if you're already in the territory, then you can, maybe find your way, but still it's going to be a bureaucratic maze, and still the procedures are going to be heavy. But imagine somebody who is a qualified nurse in Manila. That person, male or female, does not even know where to start because the rules are different in Germany, Italy, Greece, and so on. So we want to say, let's and meanwhile, we need to be very careful about the fact that Canada, Australia, UK, all of our competitors in this global economy, all craving the same human capital, are facilitating access to their territory. So we need to collectively beef this up, bring it at the European level, common rules. That's what the president announced in the political guidelines. He said common rules for the recognition of third country qualifications, and that's what we're working on in the context also of the Union of Skills. I think I stop here and I invite questions from you, Massimo.
Fantastic presentation and a lot of elements of reflection, Steven. I would like to remember to the one which connected when the meeting was on to reserve the right to intervene by putting your name on the chat. Don't write questions. I'm not going to read any question because it's extremely boring for you and for me. I prefer you to open your camera and microphone and challenge our guest directly. I would like to start, of course, from a reflection from a university perspective, because of course we are talking about upskilling and reskilling, and even if I understand that in some cases it's like, as we say in my city, Bologna, like shooting birds with a cannon, using a university for upskilling. But on the other side, there are of course different level of skill specialization that are needed. You correctly touched upon electrician and so on, where of course the content of the professionalization, if you want, is more practical rather than theoretical. But there are clearly skill needs that more and more are becoming of high background need, that where somehow the university could play a role. There are discussions around the university sector, including my university, about the possibility to look to this market as a possible expansion market to reallocate resources that today are, of course, teaching to students, but maybe using the same knowledge to also contribute to the intention, the political intention of the Commission. So my first question is, how do you see the universities in this context? Because I assume that as of now, not many of them are approaching this, let's pass me the term, market, that is expanding at European level.
The short answer is they're essential allies, but I will develop a bit the answer. One of the things I like personally about the way we came about publishing the strategy at the start of the mandate, the Union of Skills, is that we, as I said, for the first time in 15 years, said, let's have a strategy for basic education, continued education, tertiary, and upskilling and reskilling all together. Because there was indeed this bit of a divide where you had the education world, meaning the council filière, the colleagues in EAC, and the actual actors on the ground, working to provide the best possible basic education until tertiary education, and then deliver people to the labor market. And then the other actors, the EBSCO filière, the other ministries in the member states, the ministries of employment, took over and worked with that, and they didn't communicate very well. So one of the things that is absolutely crucial, it sounds basic, it sounds intuitive, but it was never done, is to bring that together. Now we need to, we are in the same room, we need to start talking to one another. For me, universities, absolutely crucial allies in upskilling and reskilling. I mean, indeed, the content knowledge, also the research for new knowledge is totally essential for our workforce. The one thing that I think where, let's say, the second partner in the room can help fertilize what the first partner is doing is the packaging. People are increasingly under contradictory demands in our labor market. It's tough to work today and to raise children at the same time. There is huge demand on flexibility. We see it because we're also responsible for the working time directive, for instance. People need to be much more flexible than before, and let's say jobs, general trend, it's difficult to compare, become more challenging. So in that new world, which you can agree with or not, but it's there, you cannot simply stop doing what you're doing at some point and start doing something else. You need to be able to combine, to step in and out of learning while you are working. And there, I think the education world, so the first partner, needs to come into the play a bit more. So what I'm not disputing is the need for a very well-rounded basic education that focuses the minds on how to acquire skills for the rest of your life. You need to invest in people before they become operational in the labor market. But then once they are entering, let's say, the job markets, you need to be able to tune in with them at different stages with adapted learning modules, learning contents. And there, I think, let's say, the business side that also provides training has a lot of experience that universities can gain from. So again, no contradiction between the two. We need to join forces. In the context of the work that I do, one of the experiments where this joining of forces is happening, it doesn't only concern universities, but it does also concern universities, is these EU Skills Academies. So EU Skills Academies were designed a bit spontaneously a few years ago out of this acute need in certain ecosystems for skills. We couldn't wait. We needed the rapid deployment system. And so we came up with, we called it academies, and maybe with hindsight, we should not have used that term because it creates a lot of confusion. What an academy is, it's not a university, an EU Skills Academy. It's not a university. It's not even a competitor of a university. It's a bundling of forces in a knowledge triangle: research, education provider, and industry, coming together, discussing in a very targeted way, what do we need right now, and then developing these learning modules in a way that can be disseminated and consumed much more easily by the workforce. And that we did for the first time in the Batteries Academy. And by the way, I just was making a lot of noise about the utility and the beauty of the Pact for Skills. The Batteries Academy was founded in the large-scale skills partnerships on batteries. So people were already discussing it for a few years. All of a sudden, there was this political will and decision to say, okay, we need a rapid deployment system, and we could create the academy on top of that, precisely because the skills intelligence and the networks were already there. And their universities have a role to play. So now we have rolled out academies in different sectors. It's not like we're going to do that across the board. We need to reflect on when an academy is needed, when it could be useful, when we would prefer other instruments to come in. But I think as suppliers of knowledge, as guarantors of knowledge, so making sure that these things are, quality assured, universities have a big role to play. But they can no longer assume that they would be the only ones that provide, that they would be the only ones that have the conversation. You can't have a conversation with yourself anymore. You need to talk to the business side. You need to talk to, let's say, the ecosystem that rolls out your training. So I'm a big fan myself of, in an intelligent way, repackaging curricula so that they become digestible for people that need them. And so that is sometimes creating friction. And universities have this idea that everything has to be well-rounded. And again, I have nothing against that. But there's a point where people simply cannot invest 100% of their time in their education anymore. You need to cater for the audience that says, now for the next 8 weeks, I have 10% of time. Now for the next half of a year, I can invest 30% of my time in education. The university needs to be there to cater for that person. And as we discussed just before, obviously the challenge then is, where do you put your limited resources as a university? But I don't have the answer to that. That's
this is a challenge universities have to somehow solve if they want to play the game. That's clearly a local and strategic choice of each university stakeholder. I don't want to stall too much time, even if I have plenty of questions. I have to be honest with you, because the topic is very appealing, very interesting, and very inspirational, I have to tell you. But I would like to give space to the audience. The first asking to talk is Craig Nicholson. So Craig, we are giving you the permission to, please, when you will open your microphone and camera, introduce yourself before asking your question. I see that you are online. Just open your microphone. Yeah.
Hi, can you hear and see me now?
Perfectly, we hear you. We still do not see you, but probably it is a matter of time. So or
Maybe you also don't need to see me. Thank you for letting me ask a question. It's really a request for clarity about the Skills Portability Initiative. Oh, I forgot to introduce myself. I'm a journalist with Research Professional News covering research in higher education. Are the near-term and the long-term goals of the Skills Portability Initiative for all the EU member states to kind of agree that, say, an undergraduate degree or a master's degree from each other are equivalent? Or is it for them to maybe agree that, say, an undergrad from country A in a certain subject is worth only 80% of an undergrad from country B in a certain subject? Or is it just to provide transparency that if you're, say, a nurse in country A, you cannot work in country B unless you have an undergraduate degree, etc.?
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's a good question. I would say the objective is very clearly to create transparency and understanding. So I don't think we're going to end up with a system that scores people in the way you suggested under your option B, whereby you would say a person exercising or having this qualification in country A has 80% of the, but it's for the employers. Ultimately, you have to make the decision to be able to very intuitively, very quickly understand what they're seeing to the level that they don't have to distrust it anymore. Because what we are seeing now, and we have some evidence of that, is that simply at the very first stage when the applications come in, there is already discrimination, not in the legal sense of the word, but people discriminate between what they know and what they don't know. It's like a restaurant that you are familiar with or one that you don't like. I'm a very adventurous person, but not everybody goes into restaurants that they don't know. And so this is really what's happening. A person gets 12 applications from his own country. In my own country, it could be from their own region. They're familiar with the system, and then they get 2 more from another region or another country, and there is this instinctive almost, I'm not going to look at that because I don't understand. So we want to surmount that barrier, but that's not the only thing we want to do. As I explained, for some professions, and actually for quite a few, regulated professions is 1/5 of our labor market. Yeah. So for 1/5 of our labor market, it's not just the appreciation of the employer that hampers mobility, it's also simply the regulation. An electrician cannot, so we want to make sure that the procedure to get that obstacle surmounted is as agile as possible. So that's the second objective. So it's those 2 elements are crucial. We don't want to harmonize education systems. We don't have the competence to do so. We're not even thinking about that. We don't want to harmonize regulation either. Just because you gave the example of a nurse, that's a bit of a tricky case, because in the past, and I'm now talking about ancient times, there was at some point the realization that especially in the healthcare sector, we needed harmonization to enhance mobility. And we achieved harmonization in a very specific subset of professions. So under the Professional Qualifications Directive, there are 7 professions that are fully harmonized across the EU in the sense that there's minimum training requirements, but those are really the exception. Nurses is one of them, doctors, dentists, veterinarians, pharmacists, and then non-medical architects. And for those, yes, we have a system in place that says as soon as you have this qualification listed in Annex 5 of the directive, you should be able to travel throughout the single market, and recognition should be automatic. But as I said, automatic recognition still takes 3 months, which is way too long. For the other professions, so the bulk of the 5,600 other professions that are also regulated but not harmonized, the idea is simply to make sure that the procedure is as short as possible and that people do not experience this as a costly obstacle, because the fees are also quite important. Let's not forget that mobility, career mobility, happens mostly for young people. You don't travel after you're 50 and become, well, people do, but the majority of people who choose professional mobility do so at the beginning of their career. So if there is this time gap that does not allow you to work for 5 months while your recognition is pending, and you have to pay a fee, and you're not sure about the outcome, well, you might reconsider even moving. And that's what we want to get at.
Thank you, Craig. Always a pleasure to see you with us. And thank you for the interesting question. We go to the next one, which is Ibrahim Ahmed. we are giving you the possibility to intervene. Ibrahim, I noticed that you have a lot of arguments, just asking you to be as short as possible to give the space also to the many people that want to intervene. Thank you.
Yes, hi. Thank you, Massimo and Steven. It was a very interesting discussion and topic as well. Also very informative. I learned a lot through the session. But I would like to highlight some points. Maybe it's a question of mine or suggestions rather than requests, but it's like something that I would like to understand. AI is invading the mobility, invading the skills of the young people and also the current expertise, not only in Europe, but also globally. So, do you have any considerations through the initiatives for the skills mobility to make pure pathways for mobility without AI involvement or AI imposing in the courses or the skills development? Because as I see now, many skills development initiatives are imposing this AI, and we are losing real skill sets that might be really beneficial to the young people and the mobility of the researchers, the expertise as well.
Yes.
And also the interest of these young people in obtaining new skills gets demotivated with the imposing of the AI in every aspect of work for mobility. So I would like to have your opinion on this and how the EU DG unit is considering this in their proposals and initiatives. Thank you very much.
No,
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Ahmed. Very, very interesting question, very topical one, of course. Huh? I would like to make a distinction between two things: AI in the workplace and the whole debate on that. And I'm not in a good place to talk about it, but I will say a few things. I'm not an expert on that, but I will say a few things. I have excellent relationship with the colleagues who know more. And then I would like to talk about AI and mobility, because I think the two are a bit distinct. In the workplace, I mean, obviously, this is one of the things that everybody is now interested in. How will it affect hiring? How will it affect firing? What will be the impact on jobs and so on? We are investing in research, but we are also not jumping to conclusions. It's very difficult on the basis of the current data. This is a fast evolving field to understand where we will be in 2 years and 3 years. That it has an impact is very clear. It has an impact on tasks. And then obviously, even if people sometimes say it only has an impact on tasks, I'm not a believer. If it has an impact on many tasks, then it also has an impact on jobs. But how exactly, that is not clear. I think companies themselves are also still positioning them. Some of them are using AI with the existing workforce to enhance what they're doing. And those are, in my view, the smart ones. Some of them are using AI to get people laid off and to do the same work with reduced number of people. And then some in between are using AI as an excuse. They are firing people for other reasons. I mean, let's face it, we also live in a very unstable world where all the trade and other connections between our economies are being disrupted at an unforeseen scale. That also has an impact on consumer confidence, on business confidence, and ultimately on layoffs. And then often AI is used as an excuse to say, well, this is due to that. So it's very difficult now in the data to disentangle this. I invite you to follow the work that employment is doing on that, DG Employment is doing on that, because you will see we will come out with very targeted reports as we learn from the data on what is happening. That it has an impact on the workforce and on the workplace is abundantly clear. Actually, the former Commission and the former DG Employment, so under the previous mandate, already took an initiative, but it was a targeted one. We have a platform workers directive. Platform workers are people offering their services through a platform. Everybody thinks of Uber and all of that, but you have other platforms as well, very high end. I met a guy who was university-trained engineer, making parts of a combustion engine in Finland for a German company through a platform. So this also exists. And this platform economy was, let's say, the big thing under the previous commission. There were two big issues. One was the status of these people. Are they self-employed? Are they workers? And so on. And that was the thing that got all the attention. But in the same directive, you will also find provisions, very clear provisions, on the use of algorithmic management on the platform itself. Because these platforms obviously want to optimize resources, optimize productivity, and they do sometimes do so in ways which we are not always in agreement with, where machines decide on the routes, machines decide on the tasks, and machines decide on the hiring and firing. So in the context of the platform workers, we also thought about that, and we came up with a number of principles that are enshrined in the directive and now have to be transposed by the member states about, for instance, humans in control, about the need for information and consultation, social dialogue, and so on. But it was limited at the time to platform workers, so not the global economy. And now the thinking is, can we extrapolate some of these principles for the global economy? And obviously, some would say yes, and others would say no. I think the answer is, let's study this. This is what the colleagues are doing. That's AI in the workplace. I don't have all the answers. And I think the person who tells you that he has is lying. It's really fast evolving. But then on AI and mobility, there I see a much more optimistic story. Because what we are doing in the context of our Professional Qualifications Directive is using AI to the benefit of procedural simplification. As I said, we have deadlines in the Professional Qualifications Directive. If you apply, you should get an answer in 3 months, in 4 months, depending on the system and so on. But those deadlines only kick in as soon as you have a completed application. And we know from testimonials that it sometimes takes 6 weeks to get there because you send your thing off. And then 3 months later, the ministry gets back to you and says, we need that document. Yeah. And so using AI, and I've seen it, I'm not a techno-optimist, I'm not a techno-pessimist, but I've seen it. It allows you to, before you even start to give you guidance on what is needed, you feed in the documents, just simple PDF scans. It recognizes them immediately, it classifies them, and it tells you, Ahmed, you're still missing 3 forms. You should go there, there, and there to get them. So before you push send, you are totally 100% sure, thanks to your AI chatbot, that what you will send will not be questioned. It will be a complete file in accordance with the regulation. And we can do this with humans as well. But remember, it's 5,700 professions in different countries with different regulations. So AI is there an ally. But then your file is transmitted and it arrives at the Ministry of Economy or the Ministry of Education or the Ministry of Health in Sweden. The guy needs to look at your qualifications, all the documents. It's not just your diploma. It can be a certificate of conformity or whatever. And the Swedish guy needs to look at your, Ahmed's, qualifications coming from 2 different countries. Because you're a traveler. You've traveled the world and you've had your education in different places. He doesn't speak the languages that these documents are drafted in. And then again, AI helps. He tells the guy, the Swedish guy, this document is that, this document is that. I will translate them for you, and I have a level of confidence that my translation is accurate 97%, 85%, depending on the combination of languages. And then the Swedish guy still has to decide whether it's a yes or a no, or a yes with compensation, but he's been aided by AI. And our thinking is that if we want to reduce these deadlines, we need to have these tools ready. So on mobility and AI, I'm an optimist. I think it can really help. I don't see, the one thing I see, and this is not something I discussed already. So you have AI in the workplace, you have AI in mobility, you also have AI in recruitment. And that's another topic, whereby your CV, the first selection is done by a machine. Yeah, that is reality now. We get, whenever we post a vacancy, we get 2 or 3 times the amount of applications that we got 5 years ago. Yeah. We need machines to process them. And there we need to make sure that our systems are fair. But you as an applicant also need to make sure that your thing is machine readable. So it's a bit, you have to be smart yourself, and we have to be, as regulators, making sure that these things are fair. So I think those three elements are there. Beginnings of answers. I'm pretty sure I don't fully exhaust your question. Well,
right, it's a complex question. Thank you, Ahmed, for your intervention. I notice we are arriving almost to the end. We still have 5 minutes. I propose to try to accommodate at least 2 questions.
Yes.
So we need fast questions and fast answers.
Sorry.
let me send you a subliminal message. So the first one is Monica Hoang Te. Monica, we are opening your microphone and camera. Yeah, please introduce yourself and open your camera and microphone. Yeah, I see now you are in the possibility to do it. Yeah.
Good morning.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you so much, Massimo. Thank you, Steven. Monica from the European Federation of Education Employers, and I'm very glad that you have mentioned social partners on multiple occasions. I have a question about the effective implementation of such an initiative from the governance perspective. How do you see it functioning? How do you reduce the fragmentation of efforts and collaboration between Ministry of Education, for example, and Ministry of Labor, perhaps also other ministries? Thank you.
You're talking about the Skills Portability Initiative?
Mainly, yes.
Yeah. Well, I think the challenge we are facing at the European level to make those two filières, as I call them, education and employment, work together is the same in many countries. I mean, let's not fool ourselves. The cooperation there is also a source of tension and can be improved. I think what is needed on both sides is a clear mentality change. And I think I've outlined already while talking about the way universities need to adapt to the world of work and the way employers can help them and also take on board the knowledge. I think this has also happened at the level of the ministry. So I would say open mindset for both the ministries, involving the social dialogue at all the levels. I understand that some of my colleagues often say this slows things down, and it does, but it leads to better results. So that's one of the elements of my piece, social dialogue at all levels, involving the social partners in the discussion, not necessarily to agree with them, but involving them in the discussion, and then indeed wake up to the world. The world is what it is. We need to adapt to that. We don't throw away the baby with the bathwater. We don't see each other as competitors, but we work together. That's, it sounds lofty, but that's my answer to your question, and it's short.
Thank you.
Bravo. Appreciated. Then we have Klaas Portier from Ghent University. Thank you very much, Monica, for actively participating. Klaas, we are giving you the possibility to intervene. It's a university, so interesting to have a challenging question from a colleague.
Okay.
Please, Klaas.
Hello. All right, here I am. Thank you very much for your time. I'll be quick. My question relates to the Skills Academies. So currently the way the Skills Academies are funded or organized, it's quite in a diverse way from different sources, funding sources, objectives, and so on. So the question is a little bit related to the future of them, especially related to how they would be funded in the future or what you envisage, at least.
Yeah. It's a very pertinent question. So you might know, Klaas, that a review is going on. So we announced it also in the EU Skills communication, where we said we will review the EU Skills Academies to identify success factors and then to roll them out in a number of sectors that were mentioned. And that's exactly what we're doing. My services are actually involved in that. So we have 15 academies, some of them extremely young, some of them not even born yet. But the thinking about them is going on. And what we noted that is in terms of funding, for instance, but also in terms of governance, the monitoring system, the platforms that they use, there's different models that apply. What we try to do is to bring a bit of order in those models by clustering them, like saying, for instance, digital academies that we have do things a certain way. But even within the digital academies world, you have different choices to be made. The same for the Net Zero Industry Academies that I'm most familiar with because we provide the funding for that. There is still different models. We don't prescribe a single model. So even the budget lines in the MFF, in the multi-annual financial framework, are different. Some of these are funded through budget lines that are not the same for others. And we don't think that that in and of itself is a problem. What I do believe in is that you need to think hard about the funding because what you want to achieve, of course, is a mechanism that is sustainable over time. Which is why I personally, and I think the Commission in the end will also converge to that view, like very much this idea of seed funding, whereby you say there is an urgent need, it's not catered for, we need to set up something that is a rapid deployment system called an academy, let's provide it seed funding, but to make sure that this is sustainable and also labor market relevant, let's incentivize it by saying you need to achieve financial sustainability in X years, or at least a share of financial sustainability in X years. There's different models. You could decrease the share of public funding over time. So this is the thinking, and that seems to work relatively well. Now, obviously, from the point of view university, I see you represent the University of Ghent. Obviously, from the point of university, there is this instinctive and very legitimate fear of commercialization. If you indeed insist too much on seed funding and you have to become financially sustainable, then the only learning modules that will be produced is the fear will be commercial. So we need to find a balance there. We believe that funding is one of the elements that can make sure that labor market relevance is not an afterthought, but focus of the minds. At the same time, there's other instruments that you can use for that. That's simply in the governance, bring in business. Yeah. They will make sure that it's labor market relevant, regardless of whether it's publicly funded or not. So balances need to be found, and I think it really will depend also on the sector and the ecosystem. But I'm not a Maoist, but the philosophy now is let 1,000 flowers bloom. So different models can apply. We try to learn lessons from them. We are not prescribing a single model, also not on funding now. It's too early. We marketed our thing as a review, not an evaluation, precisely for that reason.
Excellent. There are still some unanswered questions, but unfortunately, we are arrived at the end of the 1 hour that represents the rule of the 1 hour with Europe appointment. We are very sorry for not being in the possibility to take extra questions, but I would like to thank you very much, Steven, because I think it was a very nice appointment explaining a lot more about the potential involvement of some stakeholders that today are a little bit out of this game.
Yes.
Let's see what the future is bringing us. Thank you to all of you for having been with us. We are working on another appointment for June. We will announce it hopefully soon, so stay tuned, and looking forward to meet all of you in the next 1 hour with Europe appointment.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much for coming.
Cheers.